She stood at the microphone in front of her colleagues, champagne in hand, and pointed directly at me with a cruel smile. "And that, everyone, is my ex. No degree, no future, but great at fixing my Wi-Fi." The room erupted in laughter. I didn't argue, didn't defend myself, didn't make a scene. I simply raised my glass, smiled calmly, and said loud enough for everyone to hear, "Cheers, Ava. You'll never see me again." Then I walked out into the night. She had no idea how right those words would prove to be. Before we dive into this story of quiet dignity, patient ambition, and elegant revenge, don't forget to like and subscribe, and hit that hype button to boost this episode. Drop a comment below with your city or country. I'm always genuinely curious where you're watching from around the world. Now let's get into it. The Rooftop restaurant occupied the 42nd floor of a glass tower in the heart of downtown. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered panoramic views of the city sprawling out in every direction, lights twinkling like terrestrial stars. The space was all modern elegance, polished concrete floors, minimalist furniture, strategic lighting that made everyone look sophisticated and successful. Champagne flowed freely from a bar that stretched along one entire wall. People in expensive suits clustered in groups, their laughter mixing with the ambient music that played just loud enough to create atmosphere without overwhelming conversation. This was the annual celebration for Whitmore Associates, one of the city's premier consulting firms, the kind of company that handled Fortune 500 clients and charged fees that made small business owners weep. The kind of place where everyone had advanced degrees from prestigious universities and spoke in acronyms and business jargon that signaled their membership in an exclusive club. My name is Liam Cross. I'm 29 years old, and I didn't belong here. I was there as a guest, invited by my ex-girlfriend, Ava Whitmore, who'd recently been promoted to senior associate. We'd broken up 8 months earlier, but she'd reached out 2 weeks ago with what seemed like an olive branch. She said she wanted to clear the air, move past the bitterness, maybe even be friends again. The invitation to her firm's party was presented as a gesture of goodwill, a way to show there were no hard feelings. I should have known better. Ava and I had met 3 years ago at a coffee shop where I was working part-time while building my first software project. She was 25 then, fresh out of business school with her MBA, full of ambition and confidence. She'd struck up a conversation while waiting for her order, asked what I was working on so intently on my laptop. I'd explained I was developing security protocols for small businesses. She'd seemed genuinely interested, impressed even. We dated for 2 years. For a while, it worked. She was driven, ambitious, always networking and climbing. I was quieter, more focused on building things than talking about them. She'd introduced me to her friends from business school, her colleagues from work, her family who all had impressive credentials and corner offices. And every introduction came with a small disclaimer, a subtle apology. "This is Liam. He's brilliant with computers, but he didn't finish college. He's self-taught." At first, I didn't mind. It was true, after all. I dropped out of a state university after 2 years when I realized I was learning more from online courses and actual projects than from lectures. I'd taken the money I'd saved for tuition and invested it in equipment and certification courses. By 23, I was freelancing successfully, building custom security systems for small businesses. But as Ava's career accelerated, the disclaimers became more pointed, more apologetic. She started suggesting, gently at first, then more insistently, that I should go back to school. "Just finish the degree, Liam. Even if you don't need it for what you do, it matters for how people perceive you. It matters for us." For us. That's what she kept saying. As if my lack of a degree was a shared embarrassment, a joint problem we needed to solve together. The relationship ended 8 months ago during an argument that had been building for months. She'd received an invitation to her business school reunion and asked if I wanted to come. I'd said sure. Then she'd paused and said, "Actually, maybe it's better if I go alone this time. A lot of my classmates will be there with their partners, and everyone's doing so well, and I don't want to spend the whole night explaining why my boyfriend didn't finish college." That's when I understood. I wasn't her partner. I was her project that had failed to complete. I'd ended it that night, calmly, quietly, without drama. Just a recognition that we wanted different things and valued different qualities in a partner. She'd seemed almost relieved. 8 months of silence followed, until 2 weeks ago, when she reached out. Now I stood on this rooftop, champagne in hand, surrounded by people in designer suits discussing market trends and merger deals, and wondered why I'd accepted the invitation. Ava looked stunning tonight. She always did. A tailored navy dress that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent, her blonde hair styled in perfect waves, jewelry that was tasteful and expensive. She moved through the crowd with practiced grace, laughing at the right moments. touching people's arms in that way that suggested both warmth and authority. She'd greeted me warmly when I arrived, introduced me to a few colleagues with that same old disclaimer. "This is Liam. We used to date. He's a tech guy. Very talented, even without the formal education." The colleagues had smiled politely and quickly found reasons to move to other conversations. The evening progressed with speeches from senior partners, toasts to the firm's success, announcements of promotions and new clients. Ava's promotion to senior associate was announced to enthusiastic applause. She glowed with pride and accomplishment. Then came the informal toasts where anyone could take the microphone and share gratitude or stories. Ava stood up, champagne glass in hand, and moved to the microphone with confident steps. The room quieted, people turning to listen. "Thank you all so much," she began, her voice clear and projecting perfectly. "This promotion means the world to me. I've worked incredibly hard to get here, and I'm grateful to everyone who supported me along the way." Applause, smiles, nods of approval. "You know," she continued, her tone shifting slightly, becoming more casual, more intimate, like she was sharing a secret with friends. "Success is funny. It teaches you what matters and what doesn't. It teaches you to recognize what's valuable and what's just taking up space." A few uncomfortable chuckles, people sensing something coming but not sure what. For example, and here she turned, her eyes finding me in the crowd near the windows. "That man over there, the one trying to blend in with the catering staff." Laughter, my face flushed hot. "That's my ex-boyfriend, Liam. Sweet guy, good heart, excellent at fixing computers and resetting routers." More laughter, growing in volume. She pointed directly at me, her smile sharp and performative. No college degree, no real career trajectory, no networking skills. But hey, he makes a mean password reset, so there's that. The room erupted in laughter. Genuine, loud, unrestrained laughter. People turned to look at me, some with sympathy, most with amusement. A few pulled out their phones, probably recording or texting about this moment. I stood frozen, champagne glass in hand, every eye in the room on me. The laughter echoed off the glass walls, seeming to come from everywhere at once. Ava raised her glass higher. "So, here's to growth, everyone, to recognizing what we deserve, to not settling for less than we're worth, to choosing ambition over comfort." She looked directly at me as she said it. "To leaving behind what doesn't serve us." More applause, more laughter. Someone actually whistled. I felt something cold and quiet settle in my chest. Not rage. Rage is hot and loud and reactive. This was different. This was clarity. Some people confuse success with class. She had one, not the other. I didn't argue, didn't shout, didn't walk up to that microphone and defend myself or explain that I earned more from freelancing than half the people in this room, that I'd built systems protecting millions of dollars in assets, that my lack of a degree hadn't stopped me from mastering my craft. I didn't need to explain myself to people who'd already decided what I was worth based on credentials rather than capability. Instead, I did something that confused everyone in that moment, but would make perfect sense later. I raised my champagne glass, slowly, deliberately, high enough that everyone could see it. The laughter died down as people noticed the gesture, uncertain what was happening. I smiled. Not a fake smile, not a bitter smile, but a calm, genuine smile of someone who just made a decision. And then I spoke, my voice steady and loud enough to carry across the entire rooftop without shouting, "Cheers, Ava. You'll never see me again." The words hung in the air. People looked confused. Ava's smile faltered, her expression shifting to uncertainty. I set my champagne glass down on a nearby table with a soft clink. Then I turned and walked toward the exit. Not rushing, not stomping, just walking with steady, unhurried steps, my head high, my shoulders back. Behind me, confused silence, then uncertain laughter, then murmured conversations starting up again as people tried to figure out what had just happened. I stepped into the elevator, pressed the button for the ground floor, and watched the numbers descend. As the doors closed, I caught a glimpse of my reflection in the polished steel. I looked calm, resolved, free. I didn't realize in that moment that those would be the last words she'd ever hear directly from me, but they would prove to be the perfect goodbye. I walked out into the cool night air, the sounds of the party fading behind me. The city stretched out ahead, full of possibility and potential. Somewhere in my mind, something shifted. A decision crystallized. They wanted to measure me by a degree I didn't have? Fine. I'd give them something else to measure me by. 1 year later. The year between that rooftop and this moment had been a blur of 18-hour days, countless cups of coffee, nights spent coding until sunrise, meetings with investors who initially dismissed me until they saw what I'd built, and slow, steady progress towards something bigger than myself. I'd taken every dollar from my freelancing savings, about $40,000 accumulated over years of careful spending and aggressive saving, and invested it in building a proper company. Not just freelancing under my name, but an actual registered business with infrastructure and systems and a real value proposition. CrossSec Technologies. Cybersecurity solutions for mid-sized companies who couldn't afford the big corporate firms but needed more than basic antivirus software. The first 6 months were brutal. I worked alone, building the core product while still taking freelance gigs to cover rent and food. I slept 4 hours a night. I lived on ramen and protein bars. I turned down every social invitation, every distraction, every temptation to ease up. I'd wake up every morning and remember that rooftop, that laughter, that pointing finger. No degree, no future, and I'd work harder. The breakthrough came at month 7. A regional bank had been hit by a ransomware attack that their existing security provider had failed to prevent. They were desperate, embarrassed, and willing to try an unknown company if it meant actually solving the problem. I'd built a system specifically designed to prevent that exact type of attack. I demonstrated it to their IT director, showed him how it worked, explained the architecture in detail. He'd asked about my background. I'd been honest. I don't have a degree. I have 12 years of hands-on experience and a system that works. He'd hired me on a trial basis. 1 month to prove the system worked. It worked. No breaches, no attacks. Their data stayed secure. They signed a 3-year contract. Word spread. The bank recommended me to another financial company. They recommended me to a healthcare provider. That provider mentioned me at an industry conference. By month 10, I had 15 corporate clients and had to hire 3 employees, all of them talented programmers who, like me, had unconventional backgrounds. One had a philosophy degree. One had dropped out to care for a sick parent and never went back. One had a GED and 10 years of military IT experience. We built something special, not just secure systems, but a company culture that valued capability over credentials. By month 12, I had 32 clients, 8 employees, and revenue that made my old freelancing income look like pocket change. And then the magazine called. Tech Innovator wanted to feature me in their Disruptors issue, young entrepreneurs changing their industries. They'd heard about CrossSec from one of my clients who happened to know their editor. The interview was straightforward. They asked about my background. I told the truth, dropped out of college, taught myself, built a company based on solving real problems rather than collecting credentials. They loved it. College Dropout Reinvents Corporate Security became the headline. My face on the cover, standing in front of the server room in our new office, arms crossed, slight smile. I didn't do it for recognition. I didn't post about it on social media. I barely used social media. I didn't send copies to people from my past. I just focused on building, on growing, on proving to myself that the rooftop judgment had been wrong. But word travels in professional circles, especially when your face is on magazine covers. I later learned that 3 of Ava's colleagues from that party had seen the article. One of them forwarded it to the firm's IT department with a note. This is exactly the kind of innovative approach we need. Then, 3 weeks after the magazine hit stands, my business development manager walked into my office with an interesting lead. Whitmore Associates wants a proposal for a complete security overhaul, she said, placing the RFP on my desk. Apparently, their current provider is outdated, and they're looking for something more comprehensive. It's a big contract. Mid-6 figures annually if we land it. I stared at the company name on the document. Ava's firm. My business manager looked at me curiously. You okay? You look like you've seen a ghost. I'm fine, I said quietly. Let's put together a proposal. Our best work. She mocked my lack of a degree. Now her paycheck runs through my signature. I didn't do it for revenge. I did it because CrossSec had the best solution for their needs, and I'd built a company that delivered on its promises. But I can't deny the poetry of it. The proposal process took 3 weeks. My team put together a comprehensive package: security audit, implementation plan, ongoing monitoring, incident response protocols. We priced it competitively, but not desperately. We weren't the cheapest option, but we were the best. Whitmore Associates invited us to present. I sent my senior security analyst and our business development manager. I didn't go. There was no need, and I had no interest in turning a professional engagement into a personal confrontation. They loved our proposal. The presentation went well. The technical details impressed their IT director. The pricing fit their budget. We won the contract. The paperwork was signed electronically. Standard vendor agreements, NDAs, service level agreements, all professional and routine. Then came the internal announcement, the email that Whitmore Associates sent to all staff informing them of the new security vendor. Subject: new IT security provider. CrossSec Technologies from IT department. 2. All staff. Effective immediately, Whitmore Associates has partnered with CrossSec Technologies for comprehensive cybersecurity services. CrossSec comes highly recommended and brings innovative solutions to corporate security challenges. All staff should expect an initial security audit over the next 2 weeks, followed by implementation of new protocols. Please cooperate fully with CrossSec personnel. For questions, contact the IT department. CrossSec Technologies founder and CEO, Liam Cross. According to my analyst who was on site that day, Ava was in a conference room when the email came through. He said most people barely glanced at it. Routine IT announcement that didn't affect their daily work. But Ava apparently opened it on her phone, read the company name, scrolled down to see the founder's name. The water glass she'd been holding slipped from her hand and shattered on the conference room floor. People jumped. Someone asked if she was okay. She'd mumbled something about being clumsy, excused herself, and walked out of the conference room with a pale, shaken expression. She'd gone to the bathroom, stayed there for 15 minutes, then returned to her office and closed the door. My analyst said he'd seen her through the glass walls, sitting at her desk, staring at her computer screen, not moving. That evening, around 8 p.m., my phone buzzed with a message from a number I hadn't deleted but hadn't heard from in over a year. Ava. I saw the announcement. I stared at the message for a long moment. Dozens of possible responses ran through my mind. Some petty, some professional, some kind. I chose none of them. I didn't respond. 10 minutes later, another message. Ava, I'm proud of you. Really. What you've built is impressive. Still no response from me. Ava, I know I don't deserve a reply. But I want you to know I'm sorry. For the party, for how I treated you, for not seeing what you were building. I read the messages. Then I set my phone down and went back to reviewing code. The next morning, my implementation team arrived at Whitmore Associates to begin the security audit. They set up in a conference room, professional and efficient. My senior analyst said several people walked past and did double takes when they saw the CrossSec logo on his laptop. One of them, a guy named Trevor who'd laughed the loudest at Ava's toast, I actually stopped and asked, Wait, CrossSec? Is your founder the same Liam who used to date someone here? My analyst had smiled politely. Mr. Cross prefers to let our work speak for itself. Ava avoided the conference room where my team was working. She took a different route to meetings. She ate lunch at her desk instead of in the common areas. But she couldn't avoid the system notifications. Every time someone in the firm logged in, the welcome screen now displayed System Security provided by CrossSec Technologies. Every time someone accessed sensitive files, they saw the encryption protocol, CrossSec Secure. Every Monday morning, the IT director sent a security report to all senior staff. At the bottom, prepared in partnership with CrossSec Technologies. My name didn't appear in daily operations. That's not how these things work. But my company's name was everywhere, an invisible presence ensuring their data stayed safe, their systems stayed operational, their business kept running. I told her she'd never see me again. I just didn't say she wouldn't see my name. 6 months after we'd won the Whitmore Associates contract, I stood in my office on the 34th floor of a building downtown, not as high as that rooftop restaurant, but high enough to see the city spreading out below, lights beginning to twinkle as evening approached. CrossSec now had 47 clients, 23 employees, and had just closed a Series A funding round that would let us expand into 3 new cities. We'd been approached by 2 larger firms interested in acquisition talks. I'd politely declined. We were just getting started. The office had windows along 2 walls, modern furniture that was comfortable rather than showy, and whiteboards covered in diagrams and code snippets. My team was still in the main workspace, finishing up for the day, their voices and laughter drifting through the open door. I'd built something I was proud of, not just a profitable business, but a company that treated people with respect, that valued skill over pedigree, that solved real problems for real clients. On my desk sat a framed copy of that magazine cover, not displayed prominently, just sitting there as a reminder. College Dropout Reinvents Corporate Security. I picked it up, looking at the photo of myself. I looked different than I had a year ago, more confident, more settled, like someone who'd found his purpose. I thought about that rooftop party, the laughter, the pointing finger, Ava's voice. No degree, no future, but great at fixing my Wi-Fi. I thought about walking out, champagne glass left behind, those final words. You'll never see me again. I thought about the year that followed, the brutal work, the long nights, the slow accumulation of small victories that became something bigger, and I smiled quietly. Not because Ava's firm now depended on my company for their security. Not because the people who'd laughed at me now worked for a company that trusted me with their most sensitive data. Not because I'd proven them wrong. I smiled because I'd proven myself right. Right that credentials don't determine capability. Right that formal education is one path among many. Right that judgment from people who don't understand your journey says more about them than you, I whispered to myself. Words only I could hear. No degree, no future, just discipline. My phone buzzed. A message from my business development manager. 3 new leads today, all referrals from existing clients. We're going to need to hire again. I typed back, let's interview next week. Look for talented people who might not have traditional backgrounds. Will do. You've built something special, Liam. I set the phone down and looked out at the city as the last sunlight painted the sky in shades of orange and gold. Somewhere out there, Ava was probably wrapping up her workday, probably reviewing documents protected by my encryption, probably seeing my company's name multiple times a day, probably thinking about that night on the rooftop and wondering how she'd gotten it so wrong. I didn't take pleasure in that thought. I didn't feel vindictive or triumphant. I just felt free. Free from the need to prove anything to her or anyone like her. Free from measuring my worth by other people's standards. Free to build something meaningful on my own terms. She laughed at who I was. Now she reports to what I built. Not literally. She wasn't my employee. But in a sense, that mattered more. Her professional success now depended in part on systems I'd created, on security I'd designed, on a company I'd built from nothing but skill and determination. I'd told her she'd never see me again. I'd kept that promise. She hadn't seen me, not in person, not at her office, not anywhere in her physical world. But she saw my work, my company, my success, every single day. And that was better than any confrontation, any argument, any moment of, I told you so, could ever be. I'd learned something important that year. The best revenge isn't proving someone wrong about you. It's building a life so full that their opinion becomes irrelevant. Ava's judgment had stung that night on the rooftop. But it had also clarified something. It had shown me exactly how much energy I'd been wasting trying to fit into someone else's definition of success. Now I had my own definition, and it was working beautifully. I turned away from the window, closed my laptop, and headed out to the main workspace where my team was gathering their things. Good work today, everyone, I said. See you tomorrow. They responded with tired smiles and waves. As I walked to the elevator, I heard one of my newest hires, a 23-year-old programmer who'd taught herself coding through YouTube tutorials, saying to a colleague, I still can't believe Liam hired me. I barely finished high school. Her colleague, a guy with a physics PhD who'd decided academia wasn't for him, laughed. He doesn't care about where you've been, only where you're going and what you can do. The elevator doors closed on their conversation, but those words stayed with me. That's what I'd built. Not just a company, a place where talent mattered more than credentials, where your past didn't define your future, where the work spoke louder than the resume. I stepped out into the evening air, the city alive with people heading home or out for the night. I had no lavish plans, just dinner with my sister, who'd been my biggest supporter through the difficult year. She'd never doubted me, never questioned my choices, never suggested I'd be more successful with a degree. My phone buzzed one more time as I walked toward the parking garage. Another message from that number I never deleted. Ava, I keep seeing your company name. Every day, it's a good reminder of how wrong I was. I hope you're happy, Liam. You deserve it. I looked at the message for a long moment. Then, for the first time in 6 months, I typed a response. Me. I am. Thank you. Short. Professional. Final. I didn't block her number, didn't delete the messages, just acknowledged her words and moved on. Because that's what closure looks like. Not anger or bitterness or holding grudges, just acknowledgement and moving forward. I got in my car, nothing flashy, nothing designed to impress anyone, and drove toward my sister's house, the city lights reflecting off the windshield. Somewhere behind me was a rooftop restaurant where I'd been mocked and dismissed. Ahead of me was a life I'd built on my own terms. I'd chosen the right direction. Epilogue 2 years after that rooftop party. CrossSec Technologies had grown to 93 employees across 5 cities. We'd been acquired by a larger tech firm for a sum that made my years of ramen and 4-hour nights feel like ancient history. I'd stayed on as CEO, with full autonomy and a board that actually understood what we were building. I'd been invited to speak at a technology conference about alternative pathways to success in tech. The organizers specifically wanted me to talk about building a career without traditional credentials. As I stood backstage waiting to go on, I checked my phone. A message from an unknown number. Unknown. Hey Liam, this is Trevor from Whitmore Associates. We met briefly years ago at a party. I'm one of the people who laughed that night. I want to apologize. I saw your speech topic and realized I should have done this a long time ago. What you've built is incredible. I'm sorry for being part of that moment. I hope you can forgive me. I stared at the message, surprised, then typed back, Me. Appreciate you reaching out. Water under the bridge? Hope you're doing well. Trevor. I am. Actually, I left Whitmore last year. Started my own thing. Your example inspired me. Thanks for showing there's more than one path. I smiled at that. Maybe something good had come from that awful night after all. The stage manager waved at me. You're on in 2 minutes, Mr. Cross. I pocketed my phone and took a deep breath. When I walked onto that stage, I saw 500 faces looking up at me. Young people, mostly. Some in their teens, some in their 20s and 30s. People who'd been told they needed specific degrees from specific schools to matter in tech. I started my speech simply. I dropped out of college at 20. Best decision I ever made. Not because education doesn't matter, it absolutely does. But because I learned that education comes in many forms, and the most valuable kind is the one you choose for yourself. I told them about building CrossSec, about the struggles and small victories, about hiring people based on what they could do rather than where they'd studied. And I told them about a night on a rooftop when someone had reduced me to my lack of credentials, and how I'd walked away from that judgment and built something that made it irrelevant. Someone once said I had no degree and no future, I concluded. They were right about the first part. But the second part? That was up to me to write. The applause was thunderous. Afterward, dozens of people lined up to talk to me, to share their own stories of non-traditional paths, to thank me for validating their choices. A young woman, maybe 19, waited until the crowd had thinned. I dropped out last semester, she said nervously. My parents are furious. They think I've ruined my life. But I'm teaching myself machine learning, and I'm good at it, and I needed to hear that someone else made it work. I looked at her, at the fear and determination mixed in her expression, and remembered being that age, making that choice, facing that judgment. You haven't ruined anything, I said. You've just chosen a different route. The destination is what matters. Stay disciplined, stay curious, build things. The rest will follow. She smiled, tears in her eyes, and thanked me. As I left the conference center that evening, I thought about trajectories, how a single moment of humiliation had become the catalyst for everything I'd built, how Ava's cruelty had clarified my purpose, how walking away with dignity had been the first step toward walking toward something better. I never saw Ava again in person. I heard through mutual acquaintances that she'd eventually left Whitmore Associates, moved to another city, started over somewhere new. I hoped she'd found whatever she was looking for. But mostly, I didn't think about her at all anymore, because I'd learned the ultimate lesson. The people who judge you based on credentials rather than character don't deserve space in your success story. You write that story yourself, one disciplined choice at a time,